See what a rock in my hand. Okay, but this is a special rock. It's about at least 4,000 years old. We know it's actually the rock is older than that. But what's so special about this rock is that at some point in time, a human being sat somewhere and took this piece of prolific material and shaped it. They put a groove around this side, they tapered it, they flattened one end, and they made a tool. And then hafted it to a piece of wood, and here we go. This is the kind of material we have in this case up here. And this was probably done by one of the first residents of this area. So that's basically what we're going to talk about tonight, is we're calling the Schuylkill River Indians Lenape Unami. Okay? They didn't call themselves the Schuylkill Indians. This was a settler appellation. But in their language, the Native Americans were very specific about descriptions, the way that they described things. So by referring to them as Schuylkill River, that's where they were. So they were Schuylkill River. If you're on the Brandywine, you were Brandywine, and so forth. So this will be leading into the title of the program. One reason I was fidgeting with it, I'm not superstitious or anything, but Native Americans were very nature-based people, and like most cultures, when you couldn't explain things, you look for answers to powers beyond. So they, in their spiritual side, they believed in a great spirit, and in some spirits called manitudes. So most things, animate and inanimate, they applied some kind of a spirit to it. So I'm hoping if there's a little spirit in here, it's going to help me remember everything I have to say. Because I got 90 minutes to do 3,000 years of history, and I'm going to try to do it without notes. So here we go. Find the buttons. So this is presented by the Historical Society in conjunction with the Phoenixville Library. I introduced Annie already. My name is Paul Kusko. A little bit about me. I'm not a historian, professional. I'm not an archaeologist or anthropologist or a sociologist. I'm a retired guy with a curiosity, a love of the outdoors, interest in history. And I've been fortunate to take all of those and kind of combine them together, and through the resources of the Historical Society, come up with a plan to learn and understand about this subject, and eventually do this for folks like you. So that's the short form of my credentials. The Society is located at Church and Main Street. That's our building. It's one of the oldest churches in town. It was originally a Mennonite church back in the 1700s, I believe. And it was added on to, and now we occupy it. And we have a museum and a historical research area library in there, and it's loaded with artifacts and documents. You really ought to come down sometime. So if you're interested, look us up. We're open on Wednesdays and Fridays from 9 to 3, and the first Sunday of every month from 2 to 4?
1 to 4, and the first Saturday of every month, we're open 1 to 4 as well.
Right.
And so we're expanding our hours a lot. And first Friday, we're open from 6 to 9 at night for those that work during the day. So come on down, the museum's open.
Okay, so that's my sponsor. I'm here on their behalf. Okay. Now, what I'm going to try to do tonight is talk to you about this particular cultural group, and I'm going to try to touch on the questions: who are the Lenape? Where did they come from? Where did they go? And what did they leave us? Okay, and it would be a brief touch on that. So, kind of before I started, there's a lot of people here tonight. And the last time I did there was a lot of people. I know it's not me because nobody knows how to do this. So just quickly, is one or two hands, is there something in particular that brought you here tonight that you want to know? Anybody have something that they're just dying to find out about, a question on their mind or anything like that? Just blurt it out. Yes? You're interested in where they live? Okay, good. Somebody else?
How far their area, how far they spread out
Their territory. Okay, yeah, another question. Yes. Descendants. Interesting. We might hear that. We'll find out. That's an interesting question. Yeah. Way in the back. No. You were just stretching. All right. Yes.
I'm interested to know if there's anything that we, as we're out and about walking around, we can see, touch, or feel that will, remind us of the letter.
Okay. Boy, I didn't pay him to ask that question. But see that. Yes, right in the back.
Their involvement in the American Revolution.
Their involvement in the American Revolution. Okay. All right. Well, I think I can tie in something, a comment or two about that. But that's a little later time period, and we're going to be dealing with it. Okay. Next question. Anybody here Native American? No? Okay. Then I'm safe. All right. Pop quick before we start. How many places, roads, monuments, etc. in Phoenixville, Schuylkill Township, the surrounding area are named in honor or remembrance of Native Americans? Okay, now, what I want you to do is don't blurt them out. I want you to look on the back of your hand, okay? And we're going to come back to this. So that's just something to think about. Okay, don't answer it. Okay. All right. Okay, so who are the Lenape? This is Lenape-Hogan. This is the land of the Lenape. And as you can see, we have a territory here that encompasses all of New Jersey, part of Manhattan Island, up into New York, Massachusetts, and all of eastern Pennsylvania down into Delaware. So, and Lenape-Hogan is a part of the word that means place or land, and Lenape that's their land. Okay. So that's basically the area. We're going to be talking more of a subgroup within that. We're going to be talking about the folks that live off the Delaware, up the word at. But they're all tied in here. So what you need to understand is that Lenape-Hogan is in here. And at the time of European contact, basically we're looking at a period of, we're going to cover like 1650 into the late 1700s here. But European contact started well into the late 1400s, into the 1500s. So there's this pink area here. These are Algonquin-speaking peoples. Our Lenape are within this group. The darker color are Iroquoian-speaking groups. And some of the anthropologists claim that the difference between the Algonquin language and the Iroquoian language would be equivalent to Chinese and English. Okay, so you have that exchange right there. Within this pink area, you have all of these Indian nations. You have the Lenape, you have the Mohicans, you have the Conroys, the Powhatans, and so forth. And then over here you have the Susquehannocks. You have the whole Iroquois Federation up here, 5, 6 different groups, and so forth. All of these groups basically control territory, have culture, and so forth. There's that little old adage that kids like to sing about Columbus. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He thought he discovered something new, but somebody was already there. So it was only a new discovery in terms of his perspective and European perspective. When he arrived, or those first explorers arrived, all of North America, Central America, South America, probably every square mile was controlled by a culture. Okay? These cultures had governments, societies, they had their own cultural differences, they traded with one another, they had treaties with one another, they warred with one another, and the scale varied and the density varied, but it was not much different than Europe. It was just a whole different kind of society at the time. So people were here, but I don't know about your history going to school. With mine, it was sort of like Columbus showed up and this place was empty and there was a few people hanging around and hey, you know, it's here for us. And we might touch on that later, but the European mindset in those years, the prosperous European countries that were trading together and had treaties and stuff, came up with what they call the Doctrine of Discovery. I'm not a European historian, but basically it worked this way. You know, they all wanted to go out and discover new places. So the deal was, whoever got to a place first could claim discovery. And then they have this ritual, they put up a marker, like a pile of rocks and a cross or something, or a placard. And that meant if the Spanish got there first, it was claimed for Spain. If the French got there first, it was claimed by France. And so on and so forth. So when we're hearing about discovery, that's what Columbus was doing accidentally. He's discovering a new place, and indeed they put those characters. So Spain claimed those lands. So, but what they're doing is they're coming onto other people's property, and they're saying, you know, we're kind of type. So here's where the history begins to change. So getting back to our Lenapes, what they'll be hoping basically consists of these groups. The Lenape culture is kind of divided into these, I don't want to use tribes per se, but sub-nations kind of things, familial type of things. And we have on the north end up there, we have I'm sorry, I keep missing the little red one. We have what are called the Muncie or Mincie, depending on how it's spelled. You'll see a lot of changes in spelling. In here you have the Unanis, the Unaleni and the Unani, and down in the south you have the Unalastigo or Unalastigo. And a lot of historians attribute these totems to these particular tribes. The wolf in the north, the turtle in the mid, and the turkey down here. I'll tell you more about these folks in a little bit. They all lived along, let me go back, the Delaware River here. This is the Hudson, basically, and this is the Delaware. The early settlers who came, explorers, called this the North River, this the South River, and this is the Hudson and the Delaware. So the group we're dealing with basically are all considered Delaware Indians. Again, this is a European appellation to them. They didn't call themselves Delaware Indians at the time. It was not the Delaware River, as far as they're concerned. So that's the Delaware. The Indian name for it was Lenape Lee Hatuk. High Tuck is broad river, large, broad river. And that's what the way they refer to it. They refer to it as their river. How they got to be called the Delaware River is a Lord de Loire, who was the governor of Jamestown in the 1600s, sent one of his ship captains off to find supplies for the colony, and he sailed up the coast looking for goods, sailed into the Delaware Bay, and kind of up the stream. He said, oh, this is cool. I wonder what it's called. And instead of looking for somebody standing on a bend and saying, hey, what's the name of this river? He says, I think we'll call it after the word de Loire. They named it Delaware River. And the powers in the pen who's ever writing the history, so that's why it's called the Delaware River. Lord de Loire never saw the river, never visited the area, never talked to any of the Indians. But yet these Indians was called after him. Now in history, they thought it was derisive, didn't like it, until the colonists convinced them that he was a great leader and, wore uniforms and stuff. And they liked to be flattered. They thought, well, okay, so they kind of adopted it. They didn't have a lot of choice. And so because they lived along the river, that's how the Delaware River Indians come about. So those groups that I was telling you about, the northern group, the Muncie, Muncie, however you want to say it, they're the people from Minisink, which means stony country. They're in the highlands up near the Hudson and up the upper Delaware. If you go up the Delaware River, once you get to the Delaware water gap, and you go through, you're in Muncie country. And that feature was like their gateway. They protected it fiercely. Okay. And so from the Lehigh River north or so, you're getting into Muncie country. And then it spread across over. It was basically this group that sold Manhattan. Over there, the Indians that were living over on the Hudson side, the Dutch who came in to settle called them Wappingers or something to that name, some Dutch name, which meant downriver Indians over there. On the southern side, we have the Untitled and these people live southern New Jersey, towards the ocean in Delaware, both sides of the Delaware River going into the bay. And their name comes from the name Wunalachtigo, which Wunalat go towards, and to cow wave. So they're living going towards the ocean. And again, this is a sign of how the language works. It's descriptive in how it's telling you information every time you see that one word. It's almost like a sentence, isn't it? It's called polysymbolic. And if you, I don't have the tongue for it yet, but if you learn how to pronounce it, it's very beautiful sound as well. And then we have the Unamis. And Unamis means downriver. Nothing special about that, except that that's different from the other part of the tribe, which was going up towards the Lehigh River in the forks of the Lehigh. They were called the Unalimis, upriver. Okay, but they're basically related, kind of thing. And these are the people who signed treaties with William Penn. They called him Miquon, which means feather or quill. You know, everybody knows that William Penn wrote deeds and stuff. So that's how they got that name. And these are the people that created that treaty of friendship, chain of peace with him in 1682. And they presented him with a wampum belt as their side of the signature to that treaty. That wampum belt still exists today, and I'll show you a little shot of it later. But uniquely, though, we're talking early 1600s, 1650, that Europeans and colonial governments are starting to deal with each other. But the name Unami doesn't show up in colonial records anywhere until 727. So there was a treaty going on, and the Indians were talking about the Unamis, and the colonial people said, well, wait a minute, who are these people? They thought the Indians were coming into the... And so that gives you an idea that how communications or interest was. The settlers weren't too interested in what the Indian side of the story was at the time. And another nickname for the Unamis and the Lenape is Wabanaki, Dawn Place people. And sometimes this is a little bit of legend as to why they may be called the first original people, because they're on the East Coast and the sun comes up, so they're the first to get the sun, kind of a thing. So it's a little bit of a legend in the background. Okay, so what do the historians tell us? This guy has a story. He's a local, or was. I guess he's still around. Okay, maybe he's not talking. This is Samuel Pennick Esquire, 1843 to 1960. He's a local-born native Phoenixville. He's the son of Dr. Isaac A. Pennick, who was a very influential physician in the early years of this area. His son Samuel went on to law school, became a judge of the Common Pleas Court for 20 years, was president of the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, I think one of the founders. He authored a number of books and papers. His estate, the Pennypacker Mills, is right up, let's get back if you ever go up there. He was the 23rd governor of Pennsylvania from 1903 to 1907. He wrote a book called The Annals of Phoenixville. And it's sort of the first book, or the most comprehensive book, of the early history of the town. And at the Historical Society, we kind of use it as the starting point for a focus on Phoenixville history. And we have copies of this book there. if you're interested in them, we have them for sale. They're nice books, and if you want to come down and you could pick one up. It's a very interesting book. But when he starts off his book, well, first I want to talk about the preface inside. This is written in the inside, in the preface of his book. If in consequence of my efforts, one name shall be preserved from oblivion or a single fact shall be remembered, that would have been forgotten, I shall be amply rewarded. In other words, this was a charge to us to keep the past and history alive. So that's what we're doing tonight on behalf of the Historical Society and the Library. We're keeping the past alive with this particular program. Bam, Chapter 1, the Indians. Okay. In this book, he makes references to the Lenape, or the Delawares. He talks about streams called Sankonak, Pakiomink, Maniok. He talks about arrow and spearheads and axe heads and stone mortars. He mentions an Indian encampment at Montclair. He talks about the first settler of the area, James Anderson, hunting with the Indians and a squaw tending to his children. He talks about an Indian village on the lowland near the mouth of the Pickering Creek in an area called Green Hill. And he talks about Indian river forge trails. Indians fascinated with working at the mill at Moore Hall in 1724. Now I find that interesting. 1724, this is pretty late. He's talking about Indians being fascinated with the workings of this flour mill down here on the Pickering Creek. Well, and then he's talking about 1770s, even later, Indians gathering at corner stores. You know where that is? It's at White Horse and 23 where the Milk and Cranny is. And stuff. I'll show you about that. And they're doing contests. This is after the start of the French and Indian War. And Pennsylvania had declared a scalp bounty on Indians, men, women, and children, in retaliation for the raids going on in the western frontier of Pennsylvania. It'd be pretty risky to be having contests if there's this, you could be a scalp bounty. So it sort of says to the historian who's reading this, where to see him get this stuff. Now, he says in his acknowledgments that a lot of this is anecdotal information that was handed down by his doctor father who traveled the countryside treating the older people, and they told him stories and stuff. And Sam acknowledges that. But he also backs up a lot of his work by documenting historical colonial archives and stuff. So the guy is a pretty good historian. Anyway, that's kind of what the local historians are telling us about our first residents. And so the rest is, what else can we find out from there? So these are good search points to go to. This map is an 1850 mining map of the area. And this is through the areas that Pennypacker's talking about. This is the corner stores right here. That's White Horse Road, and this is Route 23. This is the Pickering Creek before there was a dam. And this is where the mill would have been. And this is the area he would have called Green Hill, where he says there was an Indian settlement, kind of a thing. This is the Pickering Creek coming here. This was called the Great Road. We just found a deed at the Historical Society that talks about a piece of property along here. And it describes this stump to the Great Road, to this pile of rocks, over to the river and back down again. And it's a fascinating piece. This is the area that Pennypacker is talking about. And indeed, this is the area where we have a lot of these artifacts over here were found. So we know, in fact, we have a Native American site. To be honest with you, I have not found any evidence or record of any archaeological excavations done in this area looking for village sites. And a lot of people come and say, oh, there was a village here, and a village there, and a village there. I don't want to mislead you by a village. A village to people like us, you're talking roads, stores, infrastructure, kind of thing. The Indian lifestyle, as you will see, didn't kind of lend itself to that. So we could just say that these are basically activity areas probably were places where they lived, at least temporarily. So look at that place in that big circle. That's a Google air site map of that same area. This is actually where the McAvoy brick yards are. This is the rail, this is the brick yards in here. The quarries. This was farmland. This was farmland. This is Pauling's Road. So if you notice this area here, those shaded areas that were higher near the river, and this is a kind of riverine environment that the Native Americans lived in. Somebody was asking about where they lived up and down the river. So this was likely one of the sites. We also know that across the river, there's a lot of activity as well. So that's what it looks like today. So if a Native American came back today, some pretty fancy wigwams there. You know, these are all houses on that site, kind of thing. And I don't know if you've been through there, but they're very nice. This is still somewhat open land, and that's the brickyard. Okay. And this is a nice bend in the river and where streams come in. So it was an ideal type of encampment that the Schuylkill River Indians would do. Also notice the width of the river. As I get talking about how they survived and lived and fished, that plays an important part in their site selection. So if we could go back to 1713 when Pennypacker says Mr. Anderson settled along the Pickering, and if we could then go from where he is, go back to his point in time, and then go over to where the Indians were, which was not far from where he set up his cabin, and wonder what we might see. So I'm going to have to count on you to use your imagination a little bit, because I have to tell you this. If I told you about the study I'm doing and stuff, but if you decide to do something like that, be smart. Pick a culture that has a written language and lived history, and pick a culture that had photography and make your life a lot easier. Neither of these things existed in this particular study, so you're going to have to kind of use your imagination a little bit, because I can't show you pictures from the 1700s. But this is a sketch of a typical settler cabin. It's hewn from logs on site, shelters for an animal, chimney kind of stuff, and it's in that kind of a setting. Now, at this time, the environment is nothing like it is today, believe me. We're talking pure, virgin wilderness. This growth you're looking at here is from out near Hopewell. This is probably fifth, sixth generation from that time. These trees are probably in their 70s, 80s or something. And the forests of Pennsylvania have been cut down multiple times since the time of this time period. But if you were living back there, this is what you'd be traversing through if you wanted to go over to the site we saw on the river and visit with the Indians. Okay? There are no roads. Okay? Indians didn't have cars, trucks, wagons, anything like that. They traversed on foot, and they traversed by water. Okay? So your choices of getting around is on foot, through narrow paths, through the woods and stuff, or by water. By the way, they didn't have canoes like that either. That's my boat. And if you were there with them, you'd be in something like this. Those trees I showed you, they're not even as big as that log there. So typically, what Native Americans did, they could bring down a tree, they could hollow it out, and make a dugout canoe. And you could, there's stories of canoes with dozens of people in, and some with just one. So you could, depending on the size tree, how big you are, they were pretty crafty people. And using lifted tools and fire and other things, they could craft these kind of pieces of transportation. Since we're on the river, what is the Lenape name for the Schuylkill River? Now this one we don't have to write it back there in. Who knows the name? Okay, shout it out.
The Olithgo.
Say it again.
I think, oh wait, no. No, sorry.
Anybody else? Okay, Peter said it's Manioc. Anybody else? Okay. Well, this is good because everybody said it was Manioc. And they said that because of William Penn. They said that because William Penn has a deed that he did with the Indians, and the boundaries say from here to there, and Manioc means place where we drink. Okay, now, think about this, okay? This is Dutch, by the way, and it's a Dutch word for a river, hidden river, and you all know the legend. There's these guys driving a boat up the Delaware, and they sense that there's something different about the water, and they look. And just like any male driver, instead of asking for directions, there's people on the banks, you know. They decide they're going to figure this out themselves, and they see this river. So they say, yeah, it's a hidden river. We didn't see that. Yeah, so Schuylkill means Schull is hidden, and Kill is river, so it's hidden river, okay? Now, the Indians were living there. They knew what the name was. Did they ask them? No. So anyway, so here's another problem the Indians had. They're dealing with, they have their own languages, we talked about that. They're dealing with Dutch, they're dealing with Swedes, they're dealing with French, they're dealing with English, okay? They're dealing with Germans. They all have their languages. Can you imagine a conversation? You know, you have these immigrants coming here who aren't all that educated themselves, okay? And now they're trying to talk to somebody in a totally polysyllabic language. So you're doing a lot of pointing. So, you know, somebody might say to me, you know, like, what's this? And then they want to know what my glasses are. And I think, oh, you pointed at my eye. So I tell them something totally different. Or I tell them about my ear, you know, kind of thing. So when Penn says, you know, what do you call this? You know, this point, and they said, oh, this is where we drink, you know. And so he said, oh, they call the river Manioc. You know, the Manioc, U-N-K, is a locator, it's a place. You know, if it had ana, hana, or sipu in the word, it would be a water body. You know, so I'm not saying Penn's wrong, but at this point, you got to kind of live with it, okay? The real name is Ganshoehana. Okay? Ganshoehana. Hana being river, and the rest of it being noisy, rushing stream. Now, you've all seen this people, right? What's noisy and rushing about that stream? Well, today nothing, because that river is totally re-engineered by human beings. It's not the Lenape seafood of their time. However, remember I was telling you about places that we described? This is what, you ever hear of Falls Bridge, the falls in Schuylkill? Okay, this is where the river falls from the Piedmont to the tidal water, and this is a sketch of what it looked like down near Wissahickon. It was a huge cataract, and we know the Native Americans lived on both sides because when the Dutch and the Swedes came, they made a map and they said there's Indian villages on either side. That is certainly a noisy, rushing stream there. There's also good geological reasons to be living there because of the tidal river comes up to that point, and so seafood would be coming up here. So anyway, so that's the true name of the. Now this was discovered in a journal of a Mormon missionary who lived with the Delaware River and was able to talk to them on a daily basis and learn their history. Okay, back to the fact that we're walking, because this other told me you don't want to go to the place in a boat. The area was covered with trails. So these are actual trail areas that go through Phoenixville. You have this particular trail that goes out to Ridge Pike, Route 23. You have this one, which basically goes up over Diamond Rock Hill through Paoli, practically follows 252 down to Okahoken and to Indian Territory down there. Conestoga Road, or Paoli. Yeah, Conestoga, then I'll show you a map later on. The trails into Valley Forge, trails up to Perkiomen Trail, which crosses in Collegeville, and all these sub-trails. So you get down into Kimmerton, excuse me. Buttons are small. And so there was a network between where all these encampments were, these activity sites. So, but there were trails, okay, so Native Americans didn't have horses or any of those kind of things in these days. So if we followed one of those trails and got out there, this is what you might see in terms of the settlement. It was kind of haphazard. The Indians were very laid back. Nobody was telling them what to do. Laissez-faire. They put up their huts anywhere they wanted. But they tended to be in family or extended family groupings and stuff like that. And they tended to be on highlands near streams and water and where there was ample wood. Also, they would create clearings for gardens and so forth. And then after the area was exhausted, they would move on, set up again somewhere else. This is the typical lodging you would see if you came into the village. This is called a wiki. If you see teepees, you're in the wrong part of the country, okay? And we're talking about the Midwestern plains. These are bark huts. They're very efficient. They're easy to do. They're all local materials. You don't need a building permit to put one up. But you can, if you look at it, you'll see the wood in it. And this is bark covering. And you notice the tree back here. This is just a reproduction, of course. But this is basically what they did. They took saplings, punched them in the ground, bent them over, tied them off into large hoops, strung them together. They would go to a large tree. They would take a stone, an axe with a sharp point on it, and then basically go to the trunk and then hammer out a big square, crushing the bark with the edge of the stone into a square back, and then taking another knife and then prying it off and making a huge shingle or whatever. And bast, as you know, is a great insulator, and it lasts a long time, and it's waterproof. So they would cover their houses with this, and then they could cover the doors and stuff. And typically it was a family of one, but they could also make them condos, having one, two, this would be a bigger one, big extended family. The one family would have one lodging, and share the construction method. These things could last a long time. And they often left them when the resources were burned out in the area. They would leave them, move on, and then maybe years later come back. Or if people were traveling through the area, they would just stay. It's like an Airbnb, whatever kind of thing. So that was typical. We also know that the early people to come to the area, the Dutch and the Swedes, also described these kinds of villages down in the lower Delaware. These were palisaded, and the wikis were inside. So what's that all about? So we know that in the 1500s, prior to the arrival of a lot of the Europeans, there was intertribal strife between the Lenape and the Susquehannocks, and the Iroquois, and the Mohicans and stuff. And likely, in times of strife, they would retreat to palisaded to try to get more protection out of it. So when you see these kind of woodcuts that date back into the early 1600s and stuff, that might be the kind of life. Now, these were drawn in Europe from descriptions that were sent there. Okay, these are kind of woodcuts. You notice there's a tree in the middle, and so that's probably fanciful, but it had probably to do more with legend, in fact, at that point. So we're talking Lenape on the cusp. We're talking two types of lifestyles. Pre-1600s, where these people were Stone Age, riverine people. They used stone, bone, wood, and shell technology, and it was highly suited to their way of life. They had a simple way of life. And then we get into the historic period where Stone Age people were impacted by advanced European culture, and this culture introduces diseases, metal tools, guns, flint, steel, cloth, clothing, wild horses, trading, selling land, and it had a tremendous impact on the first residents' way of life. So if you were looking at how they were dressed in the prehistoric time period, this is what you might find. This is a description. It's labeled a Delaware Indian. There's another one that John Smith described as a Susquehanna Indian. I'm not sure if that title was correct on that. But basically, you're looking at an individual dressed in animal skins and using nature-based stuff. And here's these guys, this is the artist's depiction of them out on a, little more refined kind of thing. Those these the breechcloth kind of a thing, moccasins, skin bags and stuff. This is interesting. How many of you carry fanny bags? So you get a medium-sized animal, you shoot it, or whatever, and then you just take the skin and peel it off with your socks. Take your socks off, and you have this hollow skin, okay? And then here's your bag, here's your fanny bag. It's pretty clever. And there's the bow and the adornments of animal skulls or whatever. And then the other thing is the breechclout that they wore, that most of the Indians wore at that time, and how they fit down. So again, this was done in Europe from descriptions sent there. And so here we go too. These are artist depictions. This is actually a painting of a true Lenape chieftain. At some point in time, and this was done in the 1700s, I'm sure, two Native Americans managed to get their portraits painted. So this would be as true to life of photography as you could get. That's the only two that they know exist. And his Lapa Winslow, he was a Lenape chief, and he was from the Unalini tribe, which is up the river a little bit, towards the Lehigh. And that confers to gathering fruit. Pick up on this. The tattoos that these guys wear, you might find that strange. How many tattoo parlors are there in Phoenixville? So what goes around comes around. It's not so strange. This is a cultural thing. This was adornment. They don't show painting here, but Indians like to paint their bodies. Red, white, black, yellows have different meanings. Okay, settlers might have found that scary or frightening. How many put on makeup today? Anybody put on makeup today? There you go. It's a cultural thing. They feel good, right? So that was just the way of life. Oftentimes, the tattoos had meanings. It showed something significant in their lives. There was one Moravian missionary described a guy that was tattooed. Every scalp he had taken, every battle, he was head to toe. And eventually he became a Christian and joined the church and stuff. But he was a walking, that was his autobiography, essentially. That's all his skin. The little bag with the herbs and the essentials they carry. You can tell this is a post-contact period because there's a shoehorn here, there's metal there, he's holding a gun. But the hairstyle was to shave, young men shave their heads, leaving just a hair lock on top. And that was to tempt the enemy, I guess, because your scalp was going to be taken. Why not take a little bit instead of the whole? This guy, he was much older, he wasn't in battles and stuff, so he didn't need to prove his valor anymore, kind of thing. So, to the average immigrant coming and settling, somebody like this show up in town, oh my God, and here comes the word savage, comes out and stuff like that. But it's just, if they got dressed up, man, everyone, it's like you put on your Sunday finest, you go into town, they're paying up, but they're coming into town, But it's, so again, it's the communication between cultures. Again, as we move into later into the 1700s, the Indians are giving up animal skins for cloth. Some people say that the French and Indian War was more about trade cloth and who got it than anything else. Because the Europeans were importing what the Indians wanted, and they were doing it to trade with them to extract things like animal skins and stuff. So again, They live in the forest, protect your legs, running through the bushes. The breech cotton, now they're carrying guns, kind of thing. The hair, the jackets, these are all European cloth manufactured and stuff. The decorating, all of that is still in here. So, the gender roles play an important part of the Lenape culture. They're basically divided along gender lines, and the sexes had particular tasks. Men were responsible for hunting, fishing, traveling long distances, and sometimes political things, and war, or whatever, those kind of things. Women cultivated the gardens and gathered seasonal fruits and staples for their diet, and they supplemented the fishing game that were brought in by the men. Each community had authority over a well-defined territory from which they delivered their livelihood. Somebody asked about that. How did they do their territory? Anybody belong to a watershed association around here? Basically, drainages, which define areas between ridges and stuff like that, were assigned to different groups. And that was their hunting territories, and actually basically considered owned by that particular claim. The women had a very important social, political, economic, and spiritual role in the community. There are stories of white women, Europeans, who were captured by the Indians during the French and Indian War and taken off to Ohio country and stuff to live with the Indians. And when they were liberated, they didn't want to come back because they had more self-control, power, and status within those Indian communities than they ever would have had in the white communities, because they couldn't own land, they couldn't vote. They were, their husband died, they got thrown out, the whole thing. So this was, gender roles played a big deal in this. And we'll see later how their culture was set up around a matrilineal system. So agriculture helped this particular culture settle down and stay in areas longer and have a more reasonable lifestyle than the hunter-gatherer, where they were constantly following animals and stuff. And that was due to their use in agriculture. And that starts around 500 BC to 700 AD. And it enabled a more secure food supply, because they could stock corn and stuff for the winter months as well. And this is a typical sketch of a field. They would just burn down trees to make a clearing, clear it out, and the men had the job of doing that and maybe cultivating the ground, and then the women took over from there. Corn is one of the big staples, and there's all the many ways that they could use it. The traveling food was basically dried corn powder and stuff to be carried in a small pouch, highly nutritious. The traveler along the way could just stop and add some water to it or something local, and get a very nutritious meal out of it and keep going. Very, very, very efficient to their lifestyle. They were obviously very observant. For thousands of years they lived with nature. They knew the cycles. They see berries on a tree. How come birds aren't eating that? What's different about that berry than those berries? That kind of thing. They learned what they could do. So I often say, how many of you know where the milk is in the acme of the giant? It's always in the far back corner, right? Okay, where's the produce? You know where that is. The forest was the same to them. They knew where stuff was. So, fishing. So this was an important resource, and this is why the school plays such an important role. There is a fish called the Alosis sapidissima. It's a shad. It's actually a herring. It swims in large schools of fish. And it has a life cycle where it spawns in fresh water, and it lives its life in the ocean for 5 or 6 years, and then comes back to spawn again. And it's a very nutritious fish, and it spawns at a certain time of year. And they're so numerous when they come up, you can see the water splashing on its surface. And Indians knew this, and they would harvest this. The eel was another one. And it does the other thing. It lives its life in fresh water and goes spawns in the ocean, so it goes the other way. And they can be caught very easily through spear fishing, and you can see a spear bait with a honed antler of a deer. Or they can set up these fishing weirs and string, make nets out of hemp and stuff, and literally block the river so that when these fish come up, they can entrap them and collect them in large numbers. And then they can be dried and so forth and stored and whatever. The reason the Schuylkill is so ideal fishing stream is because it's not all that wide. Like the Delaware River is huge. They could string a net all the way across, and it's also shallow. And it has many tributaries that you can go up and get into as well. So this becomes an important resource. This particular fish became a real touch point in dissatisfaction with the Lenape and the European settlers coming in, because the settlers started building dams across the streams to run mills and collect water, which interfered with the migration. And the settlers tended to go down near the bottom of the streams. So there were a lot of touch and go situations with the early inhabitants. That's an American shad right there. Just to give you an idea, this is the kayak paddle that you see over it. So that fish is this big, as long as that paddle. That's on the Delaware River. And the problem with the shad is once they come up to spawn, they die. He's an honor. And I spotted him out there when I was paddling by. So I took that picture so you can see it. And this is an example of a V-shaped rock weir, so that as eels travel down the river, they get funneled into this V, and when they get to the point, there's a basket there, and they get flopped right in it, and then they just pull right out. And this is going on today, as a matter of fact. I saw shad this past summer in Delaware, lots of them, had a good run this year, and so it's still a resource on the Schuylkill. Since the river's been re-engineered, when they built Fairlawn Dam, shut the river off, and we lost a good shad industry here on the river. I did the whole program on a shad marsh right here in Phoenixville, fighting over this fish. We had a good time. Hunting, called the chase, was the other industry that the Lenape engaged in. They hunted deer in the winter, and this is when the hides were good. The deer come fall, change the hairs, they become hollow, richer coat and stuff, and they're more valuable than summer coats. And then, of course, the food and stuff that they brought it in. This particular illustration shows the spiritual side. This Indian, the Great Spirit sent this deer, he got it. So he's used sprinkling tobacco, giving thanks to the sub-manitude that guided this deer into his life, and so forth. At the contact period, these guys were using bows and arrows. At an earlier period of time, they used something called an addle, which is a stick. It's actually a throwing stick. It's a lever. They knew physics. Didn't have language, but they understood physics, physical forces. It would propel a small spear long distances. And then during the historic period, they switched to the gun. So the women played a part in the hunts as well, because when they brought the game in, the leathers had to be tanned and stuff like that, and turned over to be made into clothes and other useful articles. And again, getting back to stone implements, this is a stone carved into a nice sharp edge, which could be put on the stick and scrape that inner skin off the hides to prepare it and stuff like that. They use feathers, beautiful blankets with feathers woven into little nets and stuff. And they use the sinew and bone and antlers and stuff to make awls and tools and needles and stuff. Much of that replaced with European goods at a later date. So they transitioned from subsistence hunting to market hunting. This was a big impact on the Native Americans because they now wanted a lot of the things the Europeans had. Europeans wanted animal skins and furs for trade in Europe. So this became the medium of trade. So it was kind of a love-hate relationship. The Indians didn't, they wanted to move away from where the settlers were, but they didn't want to get too far because they needed to trade. And the settlers kept following them. And so now the Indians are going out in order to make trades for cloth and good. They're shooting deer on a production level to sell the skins, wiped out the beaver, and so forth. And as a result, being the first to be impacted, our Ledi Lenape became one of the poorer tribes in the end because their territories were wiped out first. Kind of thing. So, big impact on their particular life. Trading posts were set up. This is a bill of ledger. This is a truck master's list. And it shows all the transactions he made on that particular date and stuff. And I'm not sure whether that's in Philadelphia or not. But this gives you an idea of the value. One moose, everything was basically set up in the value of a beaver skin. One moose was equal to 2 beaver skins, 5 pounds of feathers, a beaver skin, 2 foxes equal to a beaver skin. And you could get a yard of good duffel for a beaver skin, 2 yards of cotton for 1 beaver skin. You could get 2 pints of shot, not Boilermaker that we do here in Phoenixville, or beer, but shot for your gun, lead shot. A shirt, axes. I've read accounts where an Indian said, "Oh, how foolish these white people are, these Europeans. For 1 pound of beaver skin, I got 7 knives, 7 steel knives." And the guy that gave him the knife says, "What an idiot this guy is. This beaver skin's worth a fortune in Europe for these common knives." And the same, I've heard done for another, over clay pipes and stuff like that. The Europeans brought clay pipes in by the bushel full, the barrels full of them, and they would trade them to the Indians because they were better than the ones they were making. So it's a matter of the value you put on these things. Wampum became, in the early colonial days, colonies were expensive and the European countries had trouble funding them. So money in trade, in exchange was not plentiful. So people got into bartering a lot. The colonists realized that Indians liked to self-decorate. They had beads, and if they did their treaties and wampum belts and stuff, there was value there. And the reason they had value was the further inland you were, the less you had access to these kinds of shells. This is a quahog shell, that's a whelk shell. These are beads that are made from those particular shells. They're drilled and they're strung together. The black beads are the most valuable. One of those is worth 2 or 3 of these. Okay? And so all the fields on these belts are white, and then they used the black and purple and stuff. So the Europeans started manufacturing fake beads, counterfeit beads, and bringing them in. The Indians didn't kind of care for that. But at one point, this was currency for about a period of 30 years between the settlers and the trading shells. We have some over here you can look at. 1670, the Duke of York set a value, 1 stiver or 1 penny for 6 white beads or 3 blue black beads. So that was currency at that time. This is that friendship belt I told you about that was given to William Penn at that treaty in 1682. Can you imagine somebody making this, kind of thing? How long that would take? That would be highly valuable. Not only that, they had to make 2. One to give to him, and one for their wampum people to keep, who was the historian for their tribe. So it's very intensive kind of stuff. Family life, this is definitely the Indians who lived in the upper 1%, folks. I mean, again, this is a sketch made in Europe based on a description by Peter Lindstrom, who was an engineer who back in 1654 was the first colony. These are wampum belts. Man, you're lucky you're talking some rich dudes here. So it's kind of fanciful, but it's a good lead-in, and Yeah, it was before photography. Okay, we're going to move on quickly. Excuse me here. So the typical family had 4 to 6 children. The women generally had experience with active assistance and advice at the time of labor. Everything happened in small communities. There was no Phoenixville hospital to go for. If a child was orphaned or something, the tribe took care of them very well. These were basically extended families, so there was that kind of thing. The infants were carried about on packboards right after birth. The Native Americans continued right on with life and so forth. Girls started assisting with responsibilities at an earlier age than boys, and basically helping their mothers and stuff. The boys learned how to do survival skills. Very hands laid off, laissez-faire kind of upbringing. The woman managed, excuse me here, all of the household affairs, and the husband doesn't interfere. This is her turf. This is interesting too. The husband's property is his, and the woman's was hers. There was no property held in common, even at death. Okay, so in other words, if the husband died, his friends took all of his stuff. The woman didn't get anything, and vice versa. The husband was on his own. If the woman died, it went back to her family. Once a girl, and most cultures have rituals around maturity or puberty. The Indians were no different. And we don't have time to get into it, but there was kind of a ritualistic thing when a girl started achieve puberty. There was a ritual they put her through, and this was usually in this time period of her life. And then once completed, she's eligible for marriage. She married at a young age. I mean, nothing like today. Marriage vows were simply a consensus between a man and a woman to join as husband and wife. But you better believe that the moms and the grandmoms were in there, trying to help set things up. And the groom moved to the settlement of the bride. It was a matrilineal society. This is one of the keys why it worked so well. The women controlled all the property, and her hereditary status was passed through the maternal line, not the male line. So if you married, I don't know if they took on names of that, you could take it on the name of your wife rather than her taking on your name kind of thing. And you would live in her village with her clan and her family kind of a thing. So when a young couple married, they lived with the woman's, with the woman's family. The women elders usually picked the chiefs and so forth because they were the mothers, the grandmas. They knew where the leadership was. Okay, it made sense. And they pulled the strings behind the whole thing. They actually decided if the tribe was going to war, they weren't going to risk their children or their men if it wasn't worth going out. And if the guy went off to war, he better be back in time for the fall hunt. It was none of these 2-year drafts. And the women basically claimed these plots of land where these tribes tended to hunt and stuff. So some of these deeds, it was their hunting territories that were being sold off. The relationship for land is interesting, very different. Lenape land use was considered a God-given right by the Great Spirit for them to use the land. And there's a name for it. This is not a Lenape name, this is a Latin academic definition of it. Useful. Short form, fruits of the land, okay? They own the land in the sense that they were given God-given rights to use it, control it, protect it, take care of it. They didn't own it, that you could sell it to somebody else, okay? And so basically, they were stewards of the land, is what it amounted to. So, I just said all that. So it was a communal ownership, but the land, while they owned it, it was not free to strangers from other places. And it's interesting, some journals where some of the missionaries wanted to travel through, like New Jersey and stuff. they had the permission from the local tribes. They would be escorted in, they would be treated, they would put up for the night, they would be escorted to the next place. You followed their rules. If you didn't, then you paid the price, which could be severe. And the only way they could lose it would be either give it as a gift to others or it was seized by another tribe outright. But there was no sense of selling land in their vocabulary. European land use was different. It was a God-given right by royalty. And I mentioned the Doctrine of Discovery early on in the thing. So these dudes show up at the mouth of the river, they put up a cairn and they say, I claim this land in the name of the King of France or England and stuff. And then wherever that tributary goes, that river, so did that land claim, but there are people living in there. So now they figure, we got to get this land. So they come in and they start using European, by the way, this is a signature of Camanag in 1633 on a deed. The Indians had no written language, but they did do symbols and stuff. So the settlers used European law, and that was basically, you had deeds and survey costs and title fees and definitions of land, and once your land was yours, you had control of it. And the Indians accepted gifts, they were inviting these people in to share the land, and these guys are putting up fences. And all of a sudden, hey, you can't come through here to shoot that deer anymore, and see that their troubles begin. So when the Indians say they were defrauded, in some cases they were. And other times they thought that they were just being good neighbors by inviting people in. They saw the presence as gratitude, not necessarily payment for the land. Okay, this is the 1681 deed. Indians don't have a written language. Can you read that? I mean, that is line after line, stump to stump kind of stuff. It's all done on vellum skin or something in ink. And then all these, since Indians lived in communities where they each had territories and hunting shared common thing, they all have agreed to it. Okay, so there you go. And that's it. Now, the Indians were given this to keep as proof of the sale, and it carried around for years, but they would have to go find somebody who read the language in order to interpret it and stuff like that. And by the way, Chief Langenhausen released all the lands on the Perkiomen in 1684, 334 years ago. So that's the lands that follow the Perkiomen Stream and all its tributaries up that way. So, William Penn was smart. His whole aim was to get clear title from the Indians for all of his property in Pennsylvania. And in 110 years, the whole right of soil of Indians within the Charter Bond of Pennsylvania was distinguished through the enactment of 33 treaties and purchases. Pennsylvania is one of the states that has no Indian reservations on it. Okay? William Penn set up a couple in the beginning. He set up Okahoken down here near Ridley Park for land from Indians that he bought. About 1,000 acres, that wasn't enough. They ended up not there. But it was only as long as they stayed there. As soon as they left, the title reverted back to Penn, extinguished. He did the same thing for the Crum Creek Indians who moved over to the Brandywine, lived 1 mile either side of the entire Brandywine was their reservation, as long as they wanted. When they left, title reverted back to the Penns. Okay. The only other reservation, northwestern Pennsylvania, corn planter, they were smart. It's not a reservation. It was sold to the corn planter himself, a family, basically estate. When they died off, it all came back into the state. New York has reservations, others, none in Pennsylvania. So where do they come from? There's a couple legends, some theories, a lot of hypotheses and stuff. But basically, it's not fully resolved. Academics argue about Indian history all the time. There's supposedly the Indians had this migration theory where they came over from Siberia through the straits and stuff, and over a long period of time worked their way to the Atlantic coast. And it's called the Wallamalum or the Red Score. And it was basically legend, and it's just a litany of chiefs to chiefs to chiefs that they did this and that stuff, the battles they fought. And lo and behold, in 1833, this guy claims to have found a written document on birch bark, or on bark, in pictographs relating this thing. Well, 1833 is a long time before this is discovered. So it was kind of like not taken seriously by historians and stuff. So to this day, it's not necessarily accepted. Always a scholarly dispute about that particular thing. But that's basically the legend of how they became the original people. The Lenape came to this area, and then they split off. Some tried to go here or there. That's how the Algonquin language groups moved up and down the East Coast. And they were actually in cahoots with the Iroquois to a certain point. And the Iroquois decided to settle around the lakes. And the Lenape, So that's, they call themselves the original people. We came here, we spawned all these tribes. They're also referred to as the grandfathers. In Indian language, you use familiar terms, grandfather, uncle, niece, granddaughter, and they were the grandfathers. So all this fits into their legend of origin. So they probably did come from the Bering Strait, but they probably, another theory is they evolved from paleo, prehistoric occupation of this area following the last ice age, which was the Wisconsin ice sheet. And if you look at that, this is the last one, it's 12,000 years ago. And if you look at Pennsylvania, this is the actual ice sheet. Anybody been up on Interstate 80? You go up the Northeast Extension, go west and east. That's pretty much the edge up there. You see the land north and south, and that has a difference. So having an ice sheet this close to here, this would have been tundra. Or a totally different geological period than here. Different animals, big animals, mastodons, mammoths, roaming around and stuff like that. So much water in the ice sheet that the Jersey coast was like 50, 60 miles further out. So they know this because they have found mastodon and other kind of things on the continental shelf as well as these were all those paleo sites. So it could be that these people came in, followed these, and then just stayed and evolved. And in those days, they would have used rock shelters and places. They actually found some of these long, I think it was Darby Creek or someplace, where they did some excavations and proved that they were Native American living sites at one time. So that leads to the theory of another possible origin. So where did they go? Okay, these pressures, right there. So they started to leave the area. We started our history here in 1703 with Mr. Anderson. By 1700, the main body of the Lenape from this area were already living on the Susquehanna in the area where Harrisburg is. They were long gone out of here. Now that doesn't mean that their parts of their tribes weren't still here. They probably were. And that's what, it was said in the book about Indians still being around here and stuff like that. But the main core groups were already on the Susquehanna and they were moving west. So by 1768, they were not only over the Blue Mountain onto to the Susquehanna, but they were already out to the Allegheny Mountains, which is further west. A lot of them died. Disease took a heavy toll on the Native Americans. Also, the Dutch were not kind, the Pilgrims were not kind, the Virginians were not kind, a lot of massacres and stuff. A lot of Indian tribes moved into Pennsylvania for two reasons. The Quaker Penn legends that had gotten around the country, and the fact that the Iroquois were the dominant group on the northern tier and were inviting them in to, under, quote, their protection. The Iroquois were using them, settling them along the Susquehanna, the North Branch and West Branch, to protect their frontier from the settlers in Pennsylvania. So there was kind of a dual use there. But this was an interesting statistic right here. 1607, the Muncie group is estimated to be 15,000 people. Okay, by 1720, just 113 years, they were down to 1,000. And largely through disease and stuff like that. By 1720, 92,000 Europeans were, and approximately 11,000 enslaved Africans were living in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. So the pressures were tremendous upon our first residents here. So the first migration was up the Schuylkill River, again Schuylkill, and then up tributaries like the Toplahokan and so forth, and they settled up around Reading, PA, kept going further up the mountains, and then basically went over the Blue Mountain and then on into the Susquehanna River Valley. And this didn't happen. They didn't get all up on Monday and move through Friday. It happened over time, okay? So, in fact, some of these people still could get around Phoenixville at those later dates that Pennypacker was talking about. So in the early 1700s, they were already beginning to move up the Susquehanna, going over the Allegheny Mountain. Basically, they saw it this way. If the white people and they use those words, and basically the Europeans would stay on the east side of the Allegheny Mountains, and the Indians would stay on the west side of the Allegheny Mountains. And all they wanted was the Europeans to put a trading post, not a village, not a town, a trading post at the forks of the Ohio, Pittsburgh area, and some other places, and everybody would be happy. And it kind of can work out that way. Good. So this is the kind of terrain that Pennsylvania has. We're down in here. So their first migration basically was up into this area, and then over the Blue Mountain into the Susquehanna area, excuse me, and then up the Susquehanna into the north and west branches, and using these mountains as a barrier to where the settlers were coming. Look at this. Settlement in Pennsylvania by settlers moved west and then south into Maryland, Virginia and stuff, because it was all flat land, fertile, Great Valley, that's it. Much easier than trying to cross these forbidding mountains. Remember, there's woods, no roads, and Europeans traveled with oxes and carts and wagons and stuff. So this they thought was the safe line, and then getting into the Allegheny and stuff over there. This is a map of the river systems. You can see how they basically, this is the Susquehanna River basins. They reach up into the mountains not far from the drainage to the Alleghenies and Delaware. So these can be easily traveled and connected to. And this is part of my project. I've been paddling all of these, as many as I can, the main ones. And that's why I've been picking up these pieces of history as I paddle along. Beautiful country, and very different from when they were here, though. Then they went on to the Ohio country. Then they had subsequent migrations further west. So each period was like maybe they moved and for 30, 40 years lived in peace, and then they get pushed again, and so forth. And eventually they went to reservation in Oklahoma, Canada, and that's where we are kind of today. Reservations up here in Canada, in Wisconsin, and out here in Oklahoma. One group actually even made it into Austin, Texas for a while, and finally came back. So it says forced migration because essentially this wasn't so much force, it was pressured. But once, after the French and Indian War came in, the government started pushing them. The interesting thing was the Indians, remember that slide of the Lenape, they owned that land. God gave them their land. Once they left it, they were at the mercy of all the other tribes. They had to ask permission. Can I come and live with you? So all of these migrations are on other people's land. But did they leave us? Place things, corn, tobacco, roads, highways, artifacts. These are some of the beautiful names you see around. Untitled Chapter, Perkium, Conshohocken, Antioch. All of these are corruptions of the original Indian word. There was no R sound in the Native American language. This is kind of the spelling. And each of these says something: hacky, land, turtle, okay, where we drink liquor, where the cranberries are. Ink is another locator, cranberry plus ink place, and so on down the line. I like this one, Punxsutawney, place of nets, it's a swampy place. And I like this poem. It says, you say that they have all passed away, that noble race and brave, that their light canoes have vanished from off the crystal wave. That mid the forest where they roam, the ring of no hunter shout, but their name is on the waters and you cannot wash it out. And that's kind of, again, paddling all these rivers is true. There's like 365 water bodies that carry Native American names yet in Pennsylvania. So the other thing they left us were they knew where to cross the streams, where our bridges are today, where the Montclair Bridges was a ford, where Pollard's Road Bridge was a ford. They're basically below where streams come in. The trails I showed you. This is a network of trails across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York during Indian times. These communities were well connected. They were difficult trails to follow, but they were connected. Right here, again, this is the Oklahoking Trail from Phoenixville down to basically where Ridley Creek is. Route 1, that's the old Nequist Path, 23 Nuts Road, 401 Conestoga Road, all Indian trails. Artifacts galore. You'll see, like I said here, these are artifacts that were found here in our local area. This is called a gorget. It's like a nice piece of jewelry. Put a string through it. It's all stone. All this is lithic material. Pendants. Petroglyphs. There are some petroglyphs in Pennsylvania. I don't know if the Lenape said any, but this is a thunderbird etched into a rock, and it's in the middle of the Susquehanna River. Unfortunately, there were lots of them, but when they built the dams on the Susquehanna, a lot of them got flooded. But there are some places where this particular little Indian rock sticks out of the water, and it has 7 of these things on it. Oh, there's 7 islands, and some of them have multiple things. There's a guy in there, a snake, a deer print, an arrow. Nobody's quite sure what they mean. The thunderbird up in here, deer, snake. These are the implements they use. This is for pounding grain and like mortise and pestle. This is a soapstone bowl with pestle up there in the corner. So a Muncie clay pot. We have a pot that was, it's an artifact. It's not a found artifact. It's a remanufactured from pieces of artifacts that on a steatite, which is like a soapstone in our collection rather. People were finding these in fields and mounting and using them as bird baths. I'm told that there's 2 of these that were found somewhere down along Pickering. Was there a village of Altheim at one time? And they found these, and now they're supposed to be on Valley Forge Mountain in somebody's yard. I don't know. I'd love to find them. If you see them anywhere, call me, please. So, local artifacts like this is Phoenixville. We have the north side of Phoenixville, the large collections that we found up there, over towards St. Mary's Cemetery and Crombie, down in, you see, this is where Melixon's, for those old timers, where the tree farm was, where River Crest Lake Club Golf Course is now, and then over in Montclair, Port Providence area. These are all sites. So somebody was asking where they lived up and down the river. This is repeated up and down the river kind of a thing. So again, going back to this site, this one was one of the better sites that were focused on our shop today. And we owe a tribute to Phoebe. She was a collector, Phoebe Gilkinson. I hope you all know who she was. And she was an amateur collector, archaeologist, and she actually wrote a section on collecting Native American artifacts along the Schuylkill River Valley. If you're interested, or was interested in those places, this is available online. it's her story of where they found artifacts up and down the river between Norristown and like Pottstown and stuff like that. Rachel McAvoy, donor of our collection on their property, her friend Lola Reed, and some others. And then this young man, for his master's or doctorates, did a study where on the bluffs above Lock 60, where the golf course and stuff is, and he found places where napping sites and things like that. Unfortunately, he got pushed out when they were building the houses, so he didn't have time to do a more extensive site. And then there's a guy, found this on YouTube. He lives in Phoenixville, I guess, been collecting artifacts for 50 years on the north side of Phoenixville. His house has as many artifacts as we have books around us. So these people are keepers of history, whether they know it or not, and we owe them a great debt. So going back, how many Native American names did you come up with? Let's hear some answers.
It's about 20.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing.
I believe it's about 20.
20? Okay, now I want the actual name.
Oh, the name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the Phoenixville area, give me a couple of names.
There's the, well, I gotta go back and look at it.
Okay, anybody else think of something? Everybody said a lot, yeah. Manawha. Not an Indian name. No. No, it's attributed to the town in England that our area was called Manawha. It was part of a grant that William Penn gave to Charles Pickering. William's Penn plan was to take Pennsylvania, divide it up into large sections of land. I'm going to say I'm going to make this number up, 5,000 acres. And then give it to one person. That person was then to divide that up into 500 acres times how many would fit in there and find somebody to take each of those plantations. Montalban was, when Pickering died, his estate was divided up amongst 15 of his friends or something. And the piece that's in Phoenixville, the guy, they believe he named it after his hometown where he grew up in England. So it's not an Indian name. Okay, Perkiomen's right across the road, right? Okay, so that's one of them. Manatani is in Pottstown, but that's definitely an Indian name. How about here? Sankanak, yes. But there's nothing named Sankanak here anymore.
Yes, there is.
Where? Okay. So we're getting back to Pennypacker here. And he states that the French Creek was originally called Sankanak. That's where that comes from, okay? The street I live on, Virginia Avenue, on an old map is called Sankanak. And when it was bought by Mr. Vanderslice, he changed it to his daughter's name, Virginia. Okay? So the question is, it's an AC, AC, it's not a handy or a seaboot here. Is it a waterway? And it doesn't show up on any of the place names in Pennsylvania. The closest thing to it means Flint Stream, and there's one in Lehigh River and stuff like that. So I've been researching it. There is a word called Sekunk, which is where a little stream enters a big stream. Okay? And since most of the Indian words are corrupted, Sankanak could be a corruption of Sekunk, which is a perfect description. Remember how their words describe places where French Creek comes in, and Pennypacker says there was a village in Montclair right across the river. That's a hypothesis, so don't worry about it and tell everybody that Kusko said, because it's only a hypothesis. I haven't been able to prove it yet. So what we actually have is, except for Manatani, which you mentioned, we got Perkiomen Creek, Mingo Creek, and the Phoenixville mural. Why the mural? Up here in this corner, if you look close, remember that picture of the Native American guy with the fanny pack? It's him, but it's modified. It's like a reverse image. And there's a woman behind him. It's not these two dudes. I'm not sure what they're doing. But, so, here we have all this rich history and very little tribute to it. Now, you get into Chester County, we have two townships, Pocopson and Nantamil, that have Indian origins. You get into Berks County, we've got Onkalani, about Fort Oak, there's about 5 of them there. Delaware County, I think, has one. Montgomery County has Skipback and a bunch of others or something like that, about 4 or 5. But we don't have much. And I have been, oh, that's a close-up. See, there it is, see the image? Kind of a thing. So I've been advocating, this is a personal thing. It's up to the families and the township that maybe someday this site could become available to Schuylkill Township as an open space park or something like that. It's on the river, make a nice place. They got all these reasons why this could be a nice tribute to the Native Americans in our area. Because we have the historical facts, we have the location, and we have these other reasons. It's got 4 miles of, Schuylkill Township has only 4 miles of river frontage, with no access to the river. It would make a nice landing on the Schuylkill River Water Trail for canoes and kayaks. It's a proven riverine site for Native American history. It'd make a nice ecological study park. All these reasons why it could be, but and they're basically at that location. And it's right near all these historical places that appear in that book I showed you. So, they say so long, Louis Wick Siki, and I say you Liwi, I thank you, and that's the end of the book.